It's Thanksgiving week. Welcome to the 700 Club. You want to hear a funny?
Of course.
Funny. There was a summit, as I understand it, on global warming in Chicago.
Oh, dear.
And
say no more.
The opening day, today or yesterday, they had the largest snowfall in the last 100 years at that particular day.
And still partied on with the subject matter at hand, right?
They were wringing their hands about global warming, and look what's happening. Well, it's terrorism and not turkey is the top concern of many Americans today. Cities across the country are on high alert for a potential attack during these holidays.
And in Europe, the city of Brussels in Belgium is on the highest terror alert, with the Prime Minister declaring an imminent threat to the capital. Caitlin Burke has the story.
As people across the U.S. prepare to travel and celebrate Thanksgiving, authorities are preparing for a potential holiday terror attack. In New York City, NYPD officers swarmed a subway station during a planned simulation of an active shooter underground.
These exercises are vitally necessary. In New York City, we are at this time very well prepared.
Security is especially tight here in the U.S. at locations considered soft targets. Those are everyday places where large crowds gather, like shopping malls or sporting events. In Atlanta over the weekend, police received a tip from the hacker activist group Anonymous about a possible ISIS threat during a WWE event. Nothing happened, but Americans are on high alert. In Europe, for the third day in a row, Brussels, Belgium put on the highest terror warning, the threat of an attack considered imminent. The city virtually on lockdown, schools closed, the subway suspended. This as authorities continue to search for the last suspect in the Paris attacks. Meanwhile, the West is pulling together to support France and ramp up the war against the Islamic State. British Prime Minister David Cameron says he'll ask Parliament to approve allowing the British military to join in on the airstrikes against ISIS in Syria.
I firmly support the action that President Hollande has taken to strike ISIL in Syria. It is clear that the world is coming together to tackle this evil terrorist threat.
This week, French President Francois Hollande will travel to both Washington, D.C. and Moscow to talk with President Obama and Russian President Vladimir Putin about other ways to fight back against ISIS. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
Thanks, Caitlin. Well, the president is finally getting the message. He says, well, I'm going to be taking a tougher line against ISIS, but some leading members of his own party say he's not doing enough. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau.
Thanks, Pat. Former Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta says the United States has got to be the leader in the fight against ISIS in Syria and Iraq. On NBC's Meet the Press, he said, I think the U.S. has to lead in this effort because what we've learned a long time ago is that if the United States does not lead, nobody else will. He added that airstrikes alone aren't going to win. And Dianne Feinstein, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Intelligence Committee, says President Obama's move to send in 50 special forces to Syria isn't enough. She told CBS's Face the Nation, this has gone on too long now, and it has gotten worse. It hasn't gotten better, rather, it's gotten worse. An 18-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the murder of Amanda Blackburn, the Indianapolis pastor's wife killed at her home earlier this month. Last week, police sent a handgun found near the Blackburns' house to a crime lab to determine whether it was connected with Amanda's murder. Police say they have arrested a suspect on a preliminary murder charge along with 2 other men. Pastor Davy Blackburn found his pregnant wife shot in the head when he returned from the gym. Amanda died 2 days later at the hospital. Well, 2 teenage female terrorists used scissors in another brutal attack in Jerusalem today. It's the latest in a string of violence against Israeli citizens that have left at least 5 dead in the last few days. The attack took place on a busy street in Jerusalem near a popular open-air market. They stabbed a 70-year-old Israeli Arab man and chased another woman. Security guards shot and killed one of the attackers and wounded the second. One of the girls was 16, the other was 14. And over the weekend, a Palestinian man stabbed and killed a 21-year-old Israeli woman. In the face of these attacks, Israelis remain defiant.
We're not afraid, let's put it this way. We know that God is protecting us, and we know we're in the right place. And even people that will try to kill us and try to take us out from our country, we're here to stay.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says it's difficult to fight terrorism by individuals who are incited to murder by Palestinian social media. While many Christians escaping militant Islam have taken refuge in the West, but a wave of Muslim migrants into Europe has left some of those Christians concerned for the future. Gary Lane has that story from Sweden.
Welcome to the Swedish city of Södertälje. More than half the people here are Christian immigrants. Most have fled violence and persecution in Iraq and Syria. Many of them have come to churches like this one because they want to express themselves freely, to worship freely in the West. But even here in Sweden, they're now questioning their safety and their future. Those attending services at St. Ephraim's are members of the Syriac Orthodox Church, the world's oldest Christian community. They pray and sing in Aramaic, the ancient language of Jesus. Some of these Christians are worried about the sudden wave of new migrants and refugees entering Europe.
If this massive influx of Muslim immigrants come from North African countries and from Middle Eastern countries, they want to impose Sharia law. We are just trying to keep our traditions and our values and our democracy alive.
But as thousands pour over borders, will they assimilate and embrace Western culture, or will they attempt to impose their ways on the West? And as they did in Iraq and Syria, will these Muslim refugees extend their war to Europe? These Christians found a safe haven in Sweden, but now some fear it may eventually be lost. Amr Georges Benham worked with the Americans in Iraq. He fled his country because his life was threatened.
I was an engineer and I wanted to build my country, but they wouldn't let me. They forced me out of my country. I'm afraid these newcomers may want to destroy this peaceful country.
Some people on social media are questioning the motives of the refugees. This Hungarian police video shows male migrants tossing water onto train tracks. They said they didn't want food or water. They only wanted to get to Germany. But why? Are they seeking jobs and a better life? Or are some coming to wage war on Europe? ISIS says 4,000 of its jihadists have infiltrated the refugee ranks. And Bulgarian border guards have already arrested suspected ISIS terrorists posing as refugees. This Muslim migrant from Syria has some advice for the Swedish government.
Before letting them settle here, the Swedish government should check Facebook and use other means to determine if these refugees were fighters in Syria or Iraq.
And some Christian migrants of Södertälje believe European governments need to do more to protect them and Western culture from a potential armed or unarmed Islamic invasion.
They're trying to be nice, but it doesn't work. They should be concerned for the future generations and take their Christianity more seriously and come back to their Lord and Savior Jesus Christ.
Gary Lane, CBN News, Södertälje, Sweden.
Here at home, two major companies are set to reach a $150 billion deal that would create the world's largest drug maker in terms of sales. Pfizer and Allergan are completing the deal, according to the Wall Street Journal. Not only would it be the biggest ever merger in healthcare, it would also be the largest inversion in history. An inversion is a tax-saving maneuver where a U.S. business reincorporates in another country, one with a lower business tax rate, which helps the American company save money. Allergan, which makes Botox, is based in Ireland. Pat?
Well, the new company is going to be based in Ireland, and it's time that we wake up. Instead of inveighing against these people as tax dodgers and unpatriotic and all that stuff. I remember the head of Citicorp some years ago said capital goes where it's well traded. And if you mistreat capital, it'll go leave you and go someplace else. Well, we are mistreating capital. They have to pay state taxes. Then they have to pay federal taxes. And then they have to pay all kinds of duties and penalties on top of that. And then there's surcharges and other taxes that Obama and his crowd are thinking about. And companies say, we just don't need this. We can go to Ireland and pay maybe 10% or 15% tax, total, period, end of story, instead of a combined possibly 45 to 50% tax. And that, to a big company, is billions of dollars. So Allergan is the surviving company, and Pfizer is the biggest American drug maker, I believe, but the two of them together will clearly be a behemoth. We don't need to lose those companies. We need to keep them here at home. John?
Pat, travelers this week will be enjoying some of the lowest gas prices since 2008. And if some analysts are correct, those prices could go even lower in the weeks ahead. They believe oil could drop from its current level of $40 a barrel, possibly as low as the mid-20s. They cite different reasons, including a huge amount of oil already on the market. That could drive gas prices even farther, Pat, get this, below $2 a gallon.
Well, when I was growing up, 26 cents was the price of a gallon of gas.
And someone else pumped it for you.
Yeah, somebody else pumping, they cleaned your windshield. That's exactly right. All right, look, here's the deal on that one. These little oil companies, or the big ones too, have hedged their production. So in other words, they're producing oil and they sell it into the forward market, and they get the current price. And in those, if the stuff is selling for, a significant amount of money, then they pocket that amount of money. And then when they produce it, the person who's buying it is going to be on the hook one way or the other. That's why, they call these things futures and they call them derivatives. But what's going to happen to the hedges, most of the companies have hedged through March of next year. So you've got coming up, of course, December, and then you've got January, February, March. And during these 4 months, the hedges are coming off, and the production, instead of, say, being $80 a barrel or $90 a barrel, is going to start being $40 a barrel. And many companies are going to go bankrupt. It's going to be a slaughterhouse. I was looking at one particular analyst had picked out 4, as I recall, most of them headquartered in Houston, Texas, and the ratios were so horrendous, it's just a question of how soon they're going to go bankrupt. Well, when this happens, there'll be another flood. They'll be dumping their production and dumping their oil fields, and it's going to be butchery. Well, the Arabs knew that. They can get by at $20 a barrel. So they're saying, we're going to bankrupt the Americans. We're going to force them out of the business, and then we will then raise prices again, and we'll have, 60, 70% of the market. That's what the game is. And it is brutal, but people in the oil business, I mean, yes, you get a little cheaper gas at the pump, but there are going to be thousands of people out of work, thousands and thousands of people laid off, thousands of businesses are going to go busted, and there'll be chaos in the stock market. So this is just not a pleasant thing for anybody in the oil patch, and it's going to hurt Texas, it'll hurt North Dakota, it'll hurt other oil-producing states. So it's coming, but if it gets down to $20 a barrel, it's going to be, chaos in the oil patch.